Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you again for another show for Film Fanatic. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Sunday at about 10:26. Pretty nice day today. It's pretty warm. The weather has been pretty nice this weekend. It was a pretty nice forecast for the most part. We did have some rain earlier in the week, but it's turned into a pretty nice weekend. It's a holiday weekend, Labor Day weekend. So I got tomorrow off. Very very nice. Kind of looking forward to having a day off. So well, actually, I kind of feel funny saying that because I just had a long break from work. So and I went back for 2 days with working at the school for just Thursday and Friday, and then got some time off again. So it's kind of nice. I can't complain. Kind of a good way to ease into the new school year. It's been just about this month. September will be a year on since I've been working at the school. So very excited, for the school year. It's kind of fun. Not looking forward to the changing of the seasons, but it is what it is. So I have been doing a kind of a. It wasn't really planned. It hasn't been really planned, but I'm kind of at a point now where I'm in it to win it, and I'm kind of committed to doing it. So I started doing a show. I did a few videos recently where I started covering some of my favorite movies of my favorite director of all time, Stanley Kubrick. So I have decided to go all the way. So I started out. I did a few months ago. I did a show on The Shining, which is probably my favorite Kubrick movie of all time. And then the last 2 days, I did two videos on 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then yesterday I did a show on Doctor Strangelove. And I have, I got a little bit of a collection here just because I've been doing the videos. I have most of his movies of Kubrick's films. I have Eyes Wide Shut. I have Spartacus. I have multiple copies of 2001, and I have multiple copies of The Shining. There's a few I don't have. Barry Lyndon is one I don't have on either. I don't have it either on Blu-ray or DVD. I do need to upgrade with a big Kubrick haul of his films. I feel like his movies are, essential for any any person who's into film. I think it's the greatest stuff you can see, really, at the end of the day. And being also that I'm such a huge fan of particular genres, primarily it's always focused on horror and science fiction. I think it's safe to say that he's made, respectively, the two greatest movies of those two beloved genres. 2001, probably the greatest pound for pound science fiction movie ever made, and The Shining, also probably pound for pound the greatest horror movie ever made. And so, it's hard to go forward without acknowledging all that. And his incredible body of work is, just astounding, just astounding. One classic of another, after another. I believe I did a show. I gotta actually check because sometimes I lose count. But I did. I believe I did a show last year, or actually, it might have been this year, but quite a few months ago, on Lolita, which is one of my favorites. It might actually be right behind The Shining as my favorite Kubrick movie. I just love that movie to death, and I just feel like Kubrick's work. That's an example of Kubrick's work. I feel at its highest level. because I feel like he was such a visionary as a director and just really on all fronts pushed the boundaries as far as one can go, as far, with someone with the genius, with his genius mind and his incredibly methodical vision as a filmmaker. He pushed all of the boundaries as far as they can. I think, as far as like cinematography, the the actors, the people he would cast in his films, the scripts that he would write. He also was really heavily involved with co-writing a lot of his films and also writing his films solely. The use of music, I mean, all of his films just have music in them that are just so synonymous with that film. They're just so iconic. They act as a character. And I feel like he and he does. He's always had a reputation for pushing the actors in these various films to their almost to the shores of insanity. All the notorious stories of him of Stanley Kubrick, doing numerous takes, sometimes 100 takes of just one scene. So incredibly meticulous. And then there's also the famous, which is just one of the best documentaries about filmmaking, the documentary that was done by Kubrick's daughter on the set of The Shining, where she was basically on set during the filming of The Shining, and she recorded, kind of everything that was going on, and it's especially focused on Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson, and it's amazing. There's all these great scenes of Kubrick sitting at a table typing, and just all of the emotional weight of that movie. Where he essentially broke Shelley Duvall, into pieces emotionally, and you see it on the screen, and it's kind of hard to watch. But the interesting thing, and he had a reputation for being, kind of tyrannical with how he would deal with actors, and especially on that movie, and especially around Shelley Duvall's character and her as an actress. But the thing that is pretty miraculous is that in that documentary, she even says that, as hard as it was, and basically she was, emotionally shattered to a degree, basically reduced to tears. She thought, she felt that was, at the end of the day, even though it was the hardest thing, it was the greatest, experience that she's ever had as an actress. And she knows that movie, she knew at the time that movie was going to be, just a classic, a movie at an entirely different level, far, far above all other movies. And, she attributed that to his methods, Kubrick's methods. And she had a deep love and appreciation for him, even though, he kind of, in that documentary, it kind of comes across as a bastard, but very interesting. So today's show is going to be on another Kubrick movie, another movie that, again, is arguably one of the greatest, definitely one of the greatest, and arguably possibly the greatest movie about war, and that is Full Metal Jacket. I have this on Blu-ray. I picked this up this year, actually. I think I bought this. Yeah, I got this at Goodwill in Rockland. I was super excited. Like I said, I need to buy. I need to get all of his movies on Blu-ray. I have the essential ones. 2001. I have, of course, The Shining on Blu-ray, and those are just beyond spectacular. But and I can't forget Clockwork Orange. That's another film. I have that. I also recently bought that on Blu-ray, so I'm very excited about talking about that in one of the upcoming videos. But this movie, this was one of the first Kubrick movies I saw. I remember as a kid, the first Kubrick movie I ever saw, and I believe I saw it when back in the days of VHS, and then it was on cable quite a bit. The first movie I believe I ever saw was The Shining, and that movie just, of course, just gave me nightmares. There are scenes in that film that still I find is, and I've easily have seen that movie hundreds of times. There's still scenes in that movie that terrify me, and it still holds up. I still feel that whole world that Kubrick created is completely mesmerizing. And I remember around that time, I believe the second film of his that I saw was Full Metal Jacket. I remember seeing this on cable as a kid. And again, it had just kind of a shattering effect on me. It just, the weight of it, and especially, most people have seen this film, of course, I hope, but the opening sequence, the whole training sequence of kind of the introduction of the characters is just so kind of hard to watch, and you get a sense of what it was or what it is to be in this hardcore Marine boot camp and what life is truly like, and how just incredibly hard and demeaning it is. But so in my earliest recollection of discovering and seeing Kubrick's work, I do believe that Full Metal Jacket was like the second movie I ever saw. It came out in 1987. Again, the cast for this film is just incredible. The iconic Ray Lee Ernie plays General Hartman. He's the general in the who is who is responsible for destroying and training the Marines. He's such an amazing actor. I've always loved his work. He's actually in the remake of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which I actually really love, and he's been in so many great movies. Of course, Matthew Modine, wonderful character actor, but he's been in so many great movies. And another actor that is just, kind of one of the best actors around, Vincent D'Onofrio, amazing actor. I really love him as Kingpin in the Daredevil series. He's been in so many great movies, but he's pretty exceptional in that movie. He plays such an incredible role in this movie, and the whole like kind of character study of him as this grunt, and where his character goes is just, mind melting. Adam Baldwin, Arliss Howard, and Kevin Major Howard. And yeah, it's hard to believe this movie came out in 1987. There is a pretty decent. There's a little. The special features aspect of this edition is pretty decent. It's got commentary and it's got a little bit of some interview segments. It's pretty good. It would be cool to find a serious, in-depth edition of this movie on Blu-ray as far as special features go. But I feel like this movie is a true like meditation of war, and truly at its core, it's such a deep character study of what these young men, or what young men in general go through in times of war. I mean, it really puts you. This film always has given me a sense of what, it must be like, to knowing that you're going into this situation that you could die, and that you're, everything that you are is being stripped away, and you're essentially being turned into this killing machine. Just incredible. I mean, there's so many great war movies. Apocalypse Now, of course, Redux. just a masterpiece. Such a great movie. And also another really great film, Platoon, Oliver Stone. I I have a friend who I play music with, and Vincent Gabriel. He is also he was in the Vietnam War, and he walked point in Vietnam, and he saw, he was in the worst of the worst situations that a person or a soldier could be. And so I remember, a few years back, because he he has a pretty big love of films and stuff too. And I remember asking him, what what do you think is the movie that really conveys, or really is the closest to the experience of being in a war, like, say, for yourself, and really gives the viewer or an outsider, like, a true perspective of what it was like. And I remember he said this was one of the movies he said that was one of the best representations. He also said, of course, Apocalypse Now, but he felt that Platoon was the closest, and that really struck a chord like no other film, in dealing with all of the dark things around war. So I always thought that was interesting. And it is, it definitely is an incredible movie. I do love that movie to death. But Full Metal Jacket, again, it's another movie of where it's an example of true escapism. You're transported. I think Kubrick was such an incredible world builder, and this film is just another example of being transcended, and through sight and sound, and you're being pulled into this new world, and it's an exciting and kind of terrifying experience. In particular, the first half of this movie is just jaw dropping. Anybody out there who has seen this film knows what I'm talking about. It's the first time I remember seeing Full Metal Jacket and seeing that sequence. I was just like glued to my seat, and my jaw dropped, and I couldn't believe it. I'd never really seen anything like that in film before. And again, it's one of those movies I've seen so many times, and it still has that jarring effect. Kubrick was such a strong, such an incredible force, that I think, anytime, at least for me, and I've heard other people talk about it, but anytime you're around, and maybe one of his films, or say it's on television, or it's just somewhere around, and you're exposed to it, automatically I stop whatever I'm doing, and I'm just enamored with it. And it doesn't matter if it's like in the beginning of the movie, or in the middle, or close to the end. I just drop what I'm doing, and I become completely focused on what I'm watching. And that, to me, is the power of Kubrick. He just had so much power as a visionary, just unparalleled, just unlike anything else. And it's interesting too, because fairly recently, I've seen how examples of his influences. One of the biggest influences, especially pertaining to film itself and the director. One of my favorite modern directors in the world of horror is Robert Eggers. He, directed The Witch. Last year, came out with The Northman, which is just a spectacular movie. The Lighthouse, just an incredible director. He's got a new movie which I'm really, really excited about, a remake of Nosferatu. So very excited to see what the hell that's going to be about. And I remember seeing an interview with him about. It was an interview he had given for The Witch, which was his first movie, and that movie is just incredible, just so such an incredible journey. It's such an amazing world that he created, so rich and detailed, like Kubrick. In this documentary that I saw, interview that Robert Eggers gave about the creation of his background, well, becoming a filmmaker, but then around the idea of how he wanted to tackle the whole world of the witch. He was saying on how in this interview that he was a huge Kubrick fan, and he said that when he was in college, he became completely obsessed with The Shining, and he had seen it so many times, like hundreds of times. And he said that he got to the point where he like had the movie memorized, and he would sit with a notepad, and it's crazy. He would sit with a notepad and watch the Shining, and take notes. Particularly around notes around how the dialogue was delivered, the pacing, the camera angles, the long panning shots, the close-ups, all the technical things, certain sequences of the film that really jumped out to him. And he said he took notes of everything of that movie. And he said that when he created The Shining, I mean, when he created The Witch, he tried to use a lot of those kinds of ideas and what he got from that analysis. He tried to use that information for creating The Witch. And it was really interesting because I remember when I first saw that movie, The Witch, I really thought it was incredible. And that's a movie that I own that on Blu-ray, and every time I've seen it, um, I get something more out of it. I enjoy it more and more, and it's now I really just think it's an incredible movie. I yeah, it's even it becomes deeper and deeper for me. I just with every time I see it. And the interesting thing is, after I saw this interview, I had seen The Witch maybe a couple times at that point. I don't think I had owned. I don't think I bought it yet on Blu-ray. And I remember watching it after reading or listening to this interview that he gave about how he created The Witch and his love of Kubrick and especially The Shining. And and it was interesting because I could see suddenly really really see the influence of The Shining on that film. Like it was pretty incredible, especially with like the long panning shots. And realistically, there's not a whole lot of dialogue in that film. There's but you're getting all of this information, and there's long scenes of where there's just these long shots of the woods or the characters off in the distance, but it just creates this eerie vibe and just builds this tension. And especially around those kinds of sequences, I could really see the influence of The Shining, because The Shining, you know, for the most part, doesn't have a ton of dialogue in it either. It's really the whole thing is so immersive, and you're just getting enough information. But there's lots of sequences of where you're getting these big, panning shots, but yet you're getting all of this information. And it was super interesting because I could see that influence in The Witch. Like I was like, wow, like that's, so he, like, Robert Eggers essentially like took himself to film school just by analyzing, this movie and taking notes, like just wild. And then another influence, a music thing that I came across. There's a band I just recently got into. Actually, I got into them a couple of years ago, but I just bought one of their albums. There's a band called Imperial Triumphant, which is a band from New York, and they're just they're kind of fucking bananas. Like they really are. They are very very theatrical. They have a whole presentation with their show. They wear masks and these robes, and their music is really hard to classify. They're definitely a metal band, but they definitely have a big influence of black metal and some death metal thrown in the mix. But they also have, you know, lots of jazz and like jazz fusion thrown in the mix of their music. Frank Zappa, I mean, just so many different things. Very progressive, lots of odd meters, but they're just completely insane. But the thing that's so cool about them, and I got this vibe even before I had heard any interviews with them or even really, kind of took a dive into their music. I remember coming across, it was about 2 years ago, and I remember coming across randomly on YouTube this concert, and it was the band was called Imperial Triumphant. I could see in the video that they wore all these masks and it looked really theatrical. And I was like, oh, this looks wild. And I remember watching the video, and it was like a 35-minute concert. I was just enamored. I had never seen anything like it. And the thing that I got from it right away was that I felt like they had the cinematic quality to me. I felt like, with their combination of all of their aesthetics, it felt like I was watching a movie. Like it was just very cinematic. And then fast forward, a few months later, I, read some or listened to some interviews with them, and they really, in a few handful of different interviews, they really talked a lot about their deep love of film, and especially Stanley Kubrick. They really modeled a lot of the things that they have in their world off of his films, and especially, which I think is one of his best movies, his last movie, Eyes Wide Shut. Very, very, such a haunting movie, but they really embraced that aesthetic. And they've talked extensively of how they are very much influenced by film, and in particular Stanley Kubrick. And I just thought like that's amazing. Like you have these two, artists, one being this extreme kind of metal band, and then one being this incredible film director, and how it really shows the power of Kubrick and how much of an influence culturally he's had on so many people. So, but yeah, if you've never seen Full Metal Jacket, then I don't know what to say. But incredible, arguably, if not the greatest war movie ever made, one of the greatest character studies ever made. It has one of the first half of this film is so incredibly gut wrenching and so disturbing. So it's a jaw dropping movie. I need to watch this again. It's been a little while since I've seen this movie, but amazing masterpiece. So this is Jason Dean. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Peace.